Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Founded on the morality of compassion and wisdom, the Dharma of our original teacher, transmitted to us, especially the traditions of the Zen Gate, has fully expressed the elements to build a foundation of morality for transforming sentient beings. The Buddha once reminded his disciples not to use supernatural powers to subdue sentient beings, but to use their own moral conduct and liberation to guide them. Life for us is a sea of suffering. Each of our monastics and lay Buddhists uses their dedicated practice to benefit both themselves and others. We should face and transform the suffering of life, not run away from it. We do not flee from the realities of life. On the contrary, we use the compassionate and wise teachings of the Buddha to resolve all these things, which truly demonstrates the moral essence of Buddhism. Today, with the topic of Buddhist ethics and psychology, our goal is to expand on the essential points, supplementing the sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma. We will apply the sutras, Vinaya, and Abhidharma so that our monastic students and lay Buddhists can study this Dharma. In doing so, we will gain a more comprehensive grasp of the moral life of a Buddhist disciple. The recent exam results show that the progress of the monastic students is encouraging, but you must all make a much greater effort. You especially need to address the shortcomings that the teaching Venerable has noted in the assessment report. By doing this, we can gain better experience and perfect our final paper. If the final paper is completed well, it can be shared with other Buddhists and our brothers and sisters to read and learn from on their path of Buddhist practice. Before I conclude my talk, I would like to wish the Venerable a mind and body of constant peace and true purity and serenity. Venerable and fellow Buddhists, please take your seats. Now let's return to our work. Let's continue our lesson. Today we will be studying the sermon on the simile of the snake. This sermon is long, so we cannot finish it in a single session. We must divide it into two parts. This is a very important sermon with many key themes that are often cited in books about Buddhism. As for the story, you've already heard it, so I'll just briefly remind you of the origin of this sermon. It's because there was a monk named Ariṭṭha who held a wrong view. Ariṭṭha also means savage, unblessed. It can also mean a crow or a magical herb. In the past, there was a profession of training hawks to hunt. In ancient India, and even in Africa today, this profession still exists. They teach hawks to hunt. The hawk is released into the sky, and when it sees its prey below, it swoops down and uses its talons to tear it apart, then brings it back to its owner. People can train them to do this, just as we now train hunting dogs, but hunting with a hawk is far more effective. Since it flies high and looks down, its prey has a very hard time escaping. But the hawk must be trained to be loyal and to bring the prey back, and then the owner will share the food with. This monk, Ariṭṭha, had worked in this profession before, so the beginning of the sermon introduces us to the fact that he had bad karma from his career. In Buddhism, we call this wrong livelihood, a way of life that involves a cruel and harmful nature. So, the wrong view of this monk was like this. He said that even though the world-honored one has taught that enjoying sensual pleasures will hinder the path to liberation, he understood that it was not an obstacle. That was his stubborn, wrong view. Other monks heard this and advised him, but he would not listen. This origin story shows us one more thing, that the Buddha indirectly said that a person's merit and sin can affect their thoughts and their ability to find the truth. A person with merit is said to understand the Dharma and find the truth easily, while a person who lacks merit can easily misunderstand the truth. Therefore, merit has a very powerful influence. It is not non-existent. This is the case. So, if we have the karma to naturally admire the Dharma, if we hear a true word and feel moved and remember it deeply, we must know that we have merit. But if we are indifferent to the truth, there are people who don't care about cause and effect or are apathetic to acts of kindness and altruism, then we must know that they have committed a sin. It is the sin that hinders their path to the truth and their perception of what is right. This is what happened to the monk Ariṭṭha. Then we see a second point. The Buddha said that enjoying sensual pleasures hinders our practice. Why is that? Everyone, do you remember what we learned in ethics and psychology? Why are sensual pleasures or pleasant sensations a hindrance? If we indulge in enjoyment, it leads to selfishness. That is the process of the mind we have already studied, right? And selfishness is the cause of what? Suffering. Of course, the process from selfishness to suffering is long. There are many stages in between where we must create karma and afflictions to produce suffering. But the general formula is this. Pleasure itself is not inherently sinful, but the sin lies in the act of enjoying it. The mind of enjoyment always leads to selfishness. This is the formula we must remember. In meditation, there are also pleasant sensations. In the world, there are worldly desires. But in practice, there are also the joys of meditation. When the joys of meditation arise, if our mind is one of enjoyment, if we are meditating and our mind gradually becomes calm and the feeling of joy begins to rise, and if at that moment we pay attention to that feeling of joy, we will also be affected by selfishness. This is a very subtle point. But in meditation, when our mind enters concentration and joy appears, if we reject it and don't care about it, but instead continue to hold on to our practice, we will not be affected by this selfishness. These are profound and subtle things. In the worldly realm, indulging in worldly desires will definitely make a person selfish, and selfishness is the cause of suffering. Buddhism, on the other hand, is the path to escape suffering. Therefore, according to this formula, the Buddha said that enjoying sensual pleasures makes it impossible to practice for liberation. You must remember this formula, so you can answer people who question you. Many people in this life say that Buddhism claims life is suffering, but they don't see it. There are times when they feel happy, and at that moment, they don't see that life is suffering. So we must understand this. We must understand this formula. It is precisely at those moments when they feel happy, when they are enjoying, that the selfish mind appears and clings to that enjoyment. The attachment to self and selfishness will immediately increase, and that is the long-term cause of future suffering. We must understand this process and this formula to be able to explain it to people who have not fully understood the suffering and the process of suffering. At that time, the other monks went to talk to Ariṭṭha. They said, "Friend, do not misrepresent the world-honored one. The world-honored one has taught that the enjoyment of sensual pleasures brings little joy and much suffering, and is even more dangerous. So do not understand it differently." But the monk Ariṭṭha was stubborn and would not listen. This is a saying that the Buddha often repeated in many other sermons. And here we hear it again in this context. The Buddha has said that worldly desires bring little joy, much suffering, and are even more dangerous. It is a simple saying, but for us Buddhists, especially monastics, we must understand this thoroughly. We cannot understand it superficially. When we study the Nikayas, there are short sentences like this that contain the entire essence of Buddhism. We must understand this sentence thoroughly because the quintessence of Buddhism lies within these sentences. Why is it said that desires bring little joy and much suffering? Let's observe with wisdom. Let's look at a rich person. Is being rich a source of happiness or suffering? Happiness, right? That is joy. But the work it takes to become rich, is that a source of happiness or suffering? The constant effort to get rich, is that a source of happiness or suffering? What about protecting that wealth? The constant fear of being robbed, is that a source of happiness or suffering? It's suffering. The worry that your children will fight over your assets, is that a source of happiness or suffering? The fear that the concubines will fight each other, is that a source of happiness or suffering? There is so much suffering. So we see wealth, but it gives rise to all sorts of things that you have to worry and think about. There are people who, when they are unemployed and have no work, work only 2 or 3 hours a day and spend their days and nights praying at the temple to have a job and become rich. After a while, some god appears and makes this person rich. When they become rich, one day they say, "Please, let me be poor again like before. I'm so tired." Before, they were afraid of not having a job and worked only 2 or 3 hours a day, so they had time to go to the temple. But now they work 18 hours a day to protect their assets from declining, from losing money, from going bankrupt. There's too much suffering. Their mind is too busy. So when they become rich, they are shocked. Only then do they understand the Buddha's words. Worldly desires bring little joy, much suffering, and are even more dangerous. They always need bodyguards and feel that thieves are lurking around. There is no peace. Now let's talk about using drugs. Is taking drugs, shooting up or snorting, a source of happiness or suffering? A source of happiness or suffering? Who knows? You said you know. So it's happiness. But now, finding the money to buy drugs, is that a source of happiness or suffering? And every time you don't have money and the cravings come, is that a source of happiness or suffering? Getting arrested by the police, is that a source of happiness or suffering? All sorts of suffering. You see people addicted to drugs. When they have a craving, they will even kill their own parents for money. If their parents have no money, they will go out and snatch things from others. It's an immense suffering. And when the police catch them, their life is ruined, because they are left writhing in a heap, not given their dose until 4 or 5 days later when the cravings stop, and they are sentenced and locked up forever. Even in there, they are not at peace. They still have cravings, very strong cravings. They may not writhe anymore, but they still crave. When they get out of prison, they go and snatch things to get drugs. Immediately, they will die right away. Their entire life is buried in that fleeting pleasure. Therefore, it is called even more dangerous. Little joy, much suffering, and even more dangerous. There are many other things that are also called worldly desires, for example, male-female sexual relations. It is also a kind of worldly pleasure, but we know that all of them bring little joy, much suffering, and are even more dangerous. Fortunately, you have become monastics. Congratulations. In other sermons, the Buddha said this clearly. The other monks then tried to convince him that the world-honored one has taught that desires are like a bone. You can chew it, but you can't swallow it. You crave it, but you can't eat it. It's like you regret spitting it out, but you can't swallow it. Many Zen masters also liken it to a dog standing in front of a pan where someone is frying lard. It smells so good that it can't stand it, but it can't lick it. It means that it cannot bear to leave, but if it stands there, it can only look. Worldly joy is like that, temporary and deceitful, and so makeshift. So, desires are likened to a piece of meat. Desires are likened to a bundle of dry grass torches. What does that mean? It burns out completely and burns the person who holds it as well. Desires are likened to a pit of hot coals. What does that mean? If you fall in, your life is over. Your decision to become a monastic is correct. Desires are likened to a dream. What does that mean? It's not real, right? It's likened to borrowed goods. What does that mean? There is a price to pay for it. Finding any joy in life has a price to pay. It's also suffering. It's likened to a fruit. For example, a slaughterhouse. It's likened to a sharp weapon. It's likened to the head of a snake. But the monk, no matter how he was told, questioned, or discussed, Ariṭṭha still stubbornly clung to his wrong view. It was truly like this. As I understand it, even though the world-honored one said that sensual pleasures are an obstacle to practice, I still don't see any obstacle. This is stubbornness. Stubbornness is due to what? First, due to arrogance, thinking you are right and others are wrong. Second, it's also due to the karma of the mind that prevents you from changing. There are cases like this. In a community of 20 people, 18 people hold one view, but 2 people hold a different view. So, are those 2 people stubborn? They hold on to their opinion no matter what anyone says, right? So, are those 2 people stubborn? Not necessarily. For example, if something is wrong and you cling to it no matter what anyone says, it is called stubbornness. But in cases where that thing is right, it is not called stubbornness, but holding firm to one's position. It's the same behavior, but if what you say is right, you call it holding firm to your position. So the important thing that distinguishes stubbornness from holding firm to one's position is whether the thing you cling to is right or wrong. But how do we know what is right and what is wrong? How do we know if the opinion of these 2 people is right or the opinion of the other 18 people is right? What do we rely on to know? This is a fuzzy area in life. There is no fixed standard, and it is often based on personal feelings and pre-existing prejudices that we judge. This person is right, that person is wrong. But where does the true right and wrong lie? It is very fuzzy and hard to know. However, if we leave this unresolved, our Buddhism will lack clarity. So we must resolve it. Between the two sides with opposing views, which side is right? We have a basis to rely on the entire Dharma. The person who says something in accordance with the entire existing Dharma, and at the same time we see that person has morality in their life is usually right. Because morality creates merit, and merit helps people easily understand the truth. So when we see a person who is gentle, altruistic, humble, and self-sacrificing in their daily life, the things they say are often correct. But a person who is often angry, arrogant, and stubborn, we know that the things they propose are often wrong. Morality and truth often go hand in hand. There are cases where we see people in our community who are very gentle, but at times they are incredibly resolute, incredibly firm. We might say, how can he be so gentle but so stubborn today? No, it's because at that time he was gentle, so when he had merit, he saw something, and because he knew for sure that it was right, he was determined to protect it to the end. That determination to protect is what we call stubbornness, but in reality, at that time, he is holding firm to his position. In the beginning of the practice, when a person becomes a monastic in the early stages, if we see them as gentle, polite, yielding, hardworking, self-sacrificing, and easy to teach, that person will often grow up to be a virtuous and resolute person. Because at that time, the merit of a new monastic makes them obedient, gentle, polite, self-sacrificing, and aware of their duties. That merit makes wisdom blossom in them gradually. When their wisdom shines, they know right from wrong clearly, so they protect it very carefully. But a person who, when they first become a monastic, is a little rude and harsh, will later become a person of no consequence. They will have no virtue. Everyone will dislike them. They will not be able to do much for the Dharma. I have observed many monastics for a long time, and I see that clearly. Therefore, here the monk Ariṭṭha was stubborn and clung to his wrong understanding. In this case, this person is stubborn, not holding firm to his position. After the other monks tried to persuade him and he still didn't listen, they went to report to the Buddha immediately. They reported to the Buddha so that the Buddha could resolve it. Here, we learn one more lesson. In the community, we must be determined to correct each other's mistakes. If we see someone else's mistake and we ignore it, we will bear a heavy sin. This is the lesson we learn today, because many people have the notion of don't look at other people's mistakes. This is an extremely wrong notion in Buddhism. In the past, there was no such thing. When the monks knew someone had a mistake, they would first personally go and talk to them with compassion. And if the other person did not listen, they would report to the Buddha immediately. They would never let that mistake exist in the Sangha for a long time. The attitude in the past was like that, so the Sangha in the Buddha's time was quite good because of it. But today, we misunderstand the saying, don't look at other people's mistakes. So when we see someone else's mistake, we are silent. We say, don't look at anyone's mistakes. This creates too bad karmic results later on. The first is that when we have a mistake, no one will remind us, because we have not reminded anyone. And a mistake of ours that no one reminds us of is that a source of happiness or unhappiness. Unhappiness, right? It just exists forever. While we practice, we need to correct our mistakes. If we have a mistake and people see it but don't bother to say anything, that is truly an unhappy thing. Don't think that when you have a mistake and people don't say anything, it's a happy thing. No, that's suffering. That's the first karmic result. The second is that in every life, when we enter a community or a group to live, it will be a bad group. Because in the past, when we lived in a community, we did not build up that community. There are many people who believe that as long as they chant the Buddha's name, they will be born in the Buddha's land, where everyone is a bodhisattva. I say that is a wrong cause and effect. I say this and people get a little angry, but I have to be honest. Many people think that as long as they pray to heaven and Buddha, they will die and be born in a heavenly realm or in the Buddha's land. There is no such thing, because the cause and effect is not enough. The heavenly realms and the Buddha's lands are full of saints. If we go there, we will live with good people. We must have created the cause and effect. That when we were alive in this world, we wholeheartedly dedicated our entire life to building up the people in this realm to become good and holy. Then we can go to that holy realm. That is the cause and effect. If we are indifferent to life, turn our backs on everyone, and don't care about anyone's mistakes, then when we die, we will only go to a place where everyone is a demon, with big teeth and angry eyes, because we don't have the good karma. But when we live in this world and we see that people are not very moral, we make an effort to build them up. We call on people to love each other. We try to educate the bad people. Then when we die, we will definitely go to a place where everyone is good. This is how it works. And in the Sangha, it's the same. When we see our brothers and sisters make mistakes, we must have the courage to give them constructive criticism. We must give criticism with a compassionate heart, not with criticism and blame. If this person does not listen, we must go and tell the teacher immediately. We cannot just let it be. That is the correct attitude. And when we tell the teacher, we should not be afraid that the other person will hold a grudge. That is courage. Have you studied the lesson on courage yet? This is courage, because we have to act like that so that people are afraid and they will correct their mistakes next time. And when we give them criticism, they must immediately correct it. They don't dare to be stubborn anymore. They know that if they are stubborn, we will go and tell the teacher. Immediately, it's like that. For example, we see a person in a session receiving robes. We know that that person still has a good robe, but they pretend that they don't have one to receive another one. We see it and we pretend not to know. That is wrong. We must find a way to meet them in private with a compassionate heart and say, "Brother, don't do that. There are people who don't have a robe yet. You still have a robe. Why do you have to receive another one?" We say it with a compassionate heart. And we don't go and gossip about them to others. We don't let them lose their honor. But if that person does not listen, we go and report to the teacher immediately. Next time, they will be scared. And the teacher must be wise. When a person comes and tells on another person's mistake, the teacher must know if the person is telling on them with a compassionate heart, wanting to help their brother or sister, or if they are telling on them so that the teacher will dislike them. Be careful. The person who tells on them can also be wrong. Here we say it's fuzzy. We don't know where the truth lies. So the teacher must be very wise. The way it was in the past was like that. Today we must apply these lessons from the Nikayas. These are real events in life. And today, when we read these Nikaya sermons again, we learn small things from the life of the Buddha and the monastics in the past. And we must see the big lessons. The stories in the sermons are very small, but they are very big lessons to build up Buddhism for today. We cannot ignore any small detail like that. Reading the Nikayas is like that because these are all real events. At that time, the Buddha called this Ariṭṭha to him. After hearing the monk's report, the Buddha said, "In the name of the Tathagata, go and call Ariṭṭha to come here." When Ariṭṭha was called, the Buddha asked, "Is it true that you hold this view?" He admitted that it was true. Here, we see one more characteristic of a great person. When they hear a person report on another person's mistake, the Buddha does not make a conclusion immediately, even though the Buddha knows. But according to the principle of working, he still has to call the other person to ask them so that they can say their side of the story. That is fairness. It's like a judge now. They never convict based on one side's story. They must listen to the lawyer's defense. They must listen to the defendant's side of the story. It's the same. But now, for example, we hear a person say bad things about another person and we immediately believe it. We don't listen to the other person's side of the story. We are not fair. And in this world, it's often like that. We hear someone say bad things about that nun and we immediately believe it. We don't listen to what that nun has to say. For example, now we hear someone say bad things about that nun, saying that in the past she was a fraud and she ran away with 5 gold bars to become a monastic. We believe it. But if we are a good Buddhist and the matter is not clear, we will go and meet that nun and ask her, "I heard this, Venerable. Is it true?" We have to listen to that nun's side of the story, and then we will understand that the truth is not like that. Therefore, a teacher, when they hear a story, if they ask the other person, they will find that they have a reason for doing what they did. So their mistake is no longer 10 parts like we heard, but maybe only 5 parts or 3 parts. That's why we have to listen to both sides. The Buddha did that, so we should take this as an example. Later, when you become teachers, these are invaluable lessons in how to behave in the Dharma. After asking like that, now we hear the Buddha scold him. It's fierce. "O foolish person, why do you understand the Dharma I have taught like that? O foolish person, have I not taught in many Dharma gates about the Dharma? That is an obstacle? Those who enjoy sensual pleasures are hindered by all obstacles. I have taught that desires are like a bone, like a pit of hot coals, etc. O foolish person, not only do you distort me, but you also destroy your own merits. O foolish person, and that will lead you to unhappiness and long-term suffering. O foolish person, people will know you. You will be famous because of your wrong view." The Buddha scolded him in a series like that. Do you think the Buddha was fierce? Be honest. Was he fierce? Yes, right? How can you tell he wasn't? He was calling him foolish person all the time. But we hear it and we don't dare to say the Buddha was fierce. We are afraid of bearing a sin, right? But many times in our mind, we imagine that the Buddha was really fierce at that time. Why? Because we project our own mind onto the Buddha's mind. We remember that every time we scold someone and call them foolish, our face is angry, right? We get all worked up and angry. We think the Buddha was also like that. But in reality, a teacher with spiritual power, not to mention the Buddha, many times their words sound harsh, but their attitude is very gentle and calm. We must see that the Buddha said, "O foolish person," calmly. "O foolish person, don't be lazy and not do the homework I gave you. O foolish person, don't secretly go to the kitchen to steal food." He said it gently. The words were harsh, but he spoke softly. The Buddha in the past was like that. He was gentle, not fierce like us. I know that in the past I was still fierce, but my disciple on the nun's side, Venerable Lu Niam, who has passed away, was the head of the community. She had the responsibility to teach the community. When her brothers and sisters made mistakes, she would give them constructive criticism immediately. But her words were gentle and polite. No matter how serious the matter was, she spoke calmly and gently. So gradually, the community respected her. But many times, I am strict, my face is cold, and I scold them. But Venerable Lu Niam, she would just speak calmly. Therefore, in this passage where the Buddha scolds, we will hear it many times. When we read the Nikayas, we will encounter many times where the Buddha has scolded the monks who had wrong understandings with the words, "O foolish person." It's like we scold people as idiots. But the Buddha said it gently and sternly. After this passage, the Buddha began to teach the other monks. He didn't talk to Ariṭṭha anymore, but talked to the other monks to reaffirm the path of Buddhism, and also to pacify Ariṭṭha, and to reaffirm the faith of the other monks. Here, we will continue to see the reason for the wrong understanding. What is the reason for the mistake, monks? Here, some foolish people study the Dharma, such as discourses, mixed verses, explanations, poems, inspired sayings, thus saids, birth stories, unprecedented events, and Mahayana scriptures. What are these? We will explain them later. We don't have time. After studying these dharmas, they do not contemplate the meaning of those dharmas with wisdom. Therefore, they do not understand the Dharma clearly. They study the Dharma only for the purpose of criticizing others, only for the pleasure of debate, and they do not achieve the goal that the study of the Dharma is directed towards. And because they hold the Dharma in a wrong way, it has led them to unhappiness and long-term suffering. The Buddha gave an example, and it is this example that has become the title of this sermon. For example, a person goes to look for a water snake. A water snake. In Vietnam, I remember being bitten by a water snake. can be fatal, but in this sermon it says that the water snake is not venomous. He goes everywhere to look for a water snake. He sees a big water snake and he grabs it by the back or by the tail. The snake can turn back and bite him on the hand, on the arm, or on another part of his body. And because of this, he can die or suffer pain that is almost like death. Why is that, monks? Because he grabbed the snake in a wrong way. It is the same here. Some foolish people study the Dharma but do not aim for the correct goal. They only study for the pleasure of criticizing others and the pleasure of debate, so they end up in long-term suffering. They study the Dharma but do not reach the true goal of the Dharma that they have studied. They study the Dharma with other goals. What are those goals? We have studying for debate, right? And what else? Debating to criticize others. That's also a reason. Studying to know and criticize others. What other reasons? Certificates. Studying to get honor and prestige. Studying to get material gain. Thinking that if I am educated, people will make more offerings. What else? Studying for knowledge. These are the wrong goals in studying the Dharma. It means that when we study, we do not aim for enlightenment, but we aim for one of these things. But why is that? Why do we aim for these things? Look back here. How many of these do you have? Look back at your own mind. How many of these do you have? Everyone is different, each has their own strengths. But why are we like that? Why do we study the Dharma but do not aim for enlightenment, but for debate, for criticism, for certificates, for honor, for material gain, for knowledge? What is the cause? Who is to blame? The teachers who guide. The lecturers themselves have made the monastic students go astray from their goal. I don't blame the monastic students for this mistake. I blame the lecturers, because the lecturers, from the beginning, did not have enough wisdom, right? They are passive and just sit and listen. But if the teacher teaches, he doesn't emphasize that the Dharma is directed towards enlightenment, but he only says that you should study for debate. This school of Buddhism is like this, that school is like that. It's for debate, and studying is to get knowledge. The teachers often encourage the monastics for these two things. You have to get knowledge, you have to have an understanding of the Dharma. The other things, criticizing, certificates, honor, prestige, are what the monastics teach each other in the community. Study hard so that people will make offerings to you. Study hard so that you will have honor. When I go back to my hometown and I haven't studied, no one will respect me. You have to study and get a degree. These are things that we teach each other. But the lecturers often talk about debate and knowledge. Who is responsible for that? It's the lecturer. Therefore, a good lecturer always reminds the monastic students that they must practice and train to achieve enlightenment. Every word that the Buddha said, we must understand it deeply and be able to apply it in our life. We must not just listen to the Buddha's words to understand the theory. That is the theory, that is knowledge. We just keep it. That is wrong. We must understand it very deeply. Just like the Buddha said just now, we have to contemplate the Dharma with wisdom, because this person does not contemplate with wisdom, so they misunderstand and go astray. It's like grabbing a snake by the tail or the back. It is dangerous. It's the same when we grab these things. This is the tail and the back. Wherever you grab, you will die. You will encounter danger, breakdown, and long-term suffering in the Dharma. Only when we can grab this, it is called grabbing the head of the snake, grabbing the goal of enlightenment. And here, to grab this, every Dharma that we study must become a part of our daily life, every hour. For example, just now we said that desires bring little joy, much suffering, and are even more dangerous. We must understand that deeply. Then in our daily life, whatever makes us happy, we know it's a desire. Even in the monastery, there are not many things to be called desires. We live a simple life, so we don't see many desires. But we must be subtle and recognize in those few things what is a desire. For example, when someone praises us, that is a desire. Or one day, a dish is delicious and we try to eat a lot. We know immediately that that is a desire. Or sometimes we hear the sound of music from the neighbors. For example, a song that you enjoy. We listen and we like it. That is also a desire. There are many things like that where we can recognize a little bit of desire. Therefore, later when we grow up and face life, we will see that it is a desire, and we have been practicing rejecting it since now. Every time something is called a desire, we know that we have rejected it. So it is called being able to apply it in daily life. Then later, we will be able to apply all the Buddha's teachings in our life. Next time, after this sermon, we will study the sermon on mindfulness of the body in the middle-length discourses, Volume 3. Please remember to prepare beforehand. The sermon on mindfulness of the body is a very important sermon with many key themes that are often cited in books about Buddhism. It's a sermon for practice. When we contemplate the impermanence of the body, we should not just hear the theory that this body is an illusion. It is temporary. It will die and be abandoned. We hear it and we learn the lesson by heart, and then we don't apply it. We are grabbing the back of the snake. But a person who, when they hear the Buddha say that the body is impermanent in their daily life, whether they are walking, standing, lying down, or sitting, they always secretly know that the body is impermanent. Every step they take, they know the body is impermanent. Every word, every gesture, every movement of their hands and feet, they know the body is impermanent. Then that person has grabbed the head of the snake. They study to aim for enlightenment. But how do we aim for this? This is thanks to the Dharma teachers, the lecturers. When they teach, they remind a lot about practice, so we gradually aim for it and grab the head. Otherwise, we will be affected by this. Therefore, while I am criticizing the lecturers, I also acknowledge my own faults. Probably only a few lecturers, but many lecturers do guide the monastics to grab the head of the snake, which is to aim for enlightenment. But a few lecturers have guided wrongly. They have pushed or hinted for the monastics to grab the tails and backs of the snake, which is to aim for certificates or knowledge. That is very sinful. As for you who are studying this sermon, remember like that, you yourselves must always aim for enlightenment, so that later when you grow up and become teachers and you lecture in this place or that place, you all encourage people to study the Dharma to aim for true spiritual realization, not for these trivial reasons. And if you yourselves have grasped this from now, if you aim for enlightenment, then later your students will benefit. But if from now on you go astray and grab the wrong things, then the generations that come after you will all be ruined and Buddhism will decline. So each person who goes before and is correct will pull countless people who come after them to be correct. This is the place where the Buddha gives a very important warning in the sermon on the simile of the snake. We must grasp this very carefully, understand the meaning of this very carefully. What is the purpose of studying the Dharma? What is the purpose of studying? And we are monastic students now, so this is what we must affirm decisively and strongly today. This sermon affirms that. It affirms it for you, for your whole life, and for your future disciples and students. Then the Buddha repeated that example. So a person who studies the Dharma and contemplates with wisdom understands it correctly and has long-term happiness. For example, a person goes to look for a water snake. When they see the water snake, they take a stick with a fork and pin down its neck and grab its head. And they grab its head with their hand. Now, even if that snake coils around his arm or around his neck, it cannot harm the person who caught the snake anymore. In the morning, I asked, but I was a little mean. I didn't explain to the nuns at Thien Phuc to let them understand it on their own. I asked, I challenge you to tell me what it represents when you grab the snake by the head and let it coil around your arm or do whatever it wants without being affected. I didn't explain it so that they could think. But here, I know that even without an explanation, you will understand. Who understands? Stand up and say, Mintrai, do you understand? Mintrai. Venerable, I just realized that if we practice the Dharma like grabbing the head of the snake, and we let the snake coil around our arm, it's like those things that we have to accept and endure to overcome the difficulties in our practice. And I understand it like this: when we grasp the Dharma, it means we grasp the goal of going to the path of liberation. At that time, those things that we listed here, like debate, criticism, certificates, honor, are the things that tempt us. They guide us to the wrong path. But in reality, These things are always there in our daily life. They are always tempting us. Venerable, Min try, you're getting closer. You're getting closer. Let me explain it more clearly. For example, when we grasp this goal, it means that when we study and understand the Dharma, we practice it to aim for enlightenment. Then these things will happen. Do these things exist? Of course. But do they become something that makes us fall into a wrong path? No, because at that time we debate to guide others. Because we already have morality. We have the right ideal. Now, does knowledge go wrong? Of course not. We have to study. It's a good thing. Can't bite us anymore. Coils around our arm, around our head. Coils. For example, do certificates exist? Of course. We have to get a certificate when we study. But when we hold the certificate, it is no longer as important to us as it was in the past, because it is no longer the goal. In the past, we suffered day and night because of it. Now that is over. We have a certificate, but it's not important. For example, does honor exist? Of course. When we study, people also cherish us. They see that we are hardworking. Do material gains exist? Of course. It means that these things will exist again. And sometimes, when needed, we also criticize others. It means that all these things will exist, but not for a bad purpose anymore. Not with a bad mind anymore. Before, all of these things were bad. Wherever we grabbed, we would die. But when we have the true ideal of enlightenment, when we have true practice, then all of these things become tools. We use them in our daily life to teach others and to do Dharma work. Do you agree? Do you agree? Why do so many people look at me blankly? Why is that? What Min Tri just said, when he was asked, he suddenly realized something. It's very similar to me. It's often like that for me too. I don't understand why. As soon as they ask me, before they finish the question, I already know what they want. And at that moment, I have the answer, even though before that I had never known about that issue. I don't understand why it's so strange. I just heard Min Tri say that and I suddenly realized it. I suddenly remembered that it also happens to me. Now for the next part, the raft. When we read books about Buddhism, we often hear about the raft of the Dharma. This is exactly in this sermon. In the past, when we studied the raft of the Dharma, we studied it through intermediate books, but today we will read it directly from the oldest and most correct text of the Buddha's words. I will teach you the simile of the raft to cross the river, not to cling to it, and to skillfully contemplate. There was a person who was walking on a long, big road and came to a wide body of water. The near shore was dangerous and full of fear, but the far shore was safe and happy. But there was no boat to cross, no bridge to cross. So this person gathered grass, trees, branches, and leaves and tied them together to make a raft. And relying on this raft, he made an effort to use his hands and feet to swim to the other side safely. When he got to the other side, he thought, "This raft has been very useful to me. Now I will put this raft on my head and carry it on my shoulder to go wherever I want." Monks, is it logical for that person to do that? No, world-honored one. That's right, monks. When that person has crossed the shore, the most logical and correct thought is to leave the raft behind, sink it into the water, or pull it up onto the land and leave it there. And then he will go wherever he wants freely. Monks, that person has acted logically with the raft. It is the same, monks. I have taught the Dharma as a raft to cross over, not to cling to it. Monks, you need to understand the simile of the raft. Even the Dharma has to be abandoned, not to mention the non-Dharma. This famous saying, even the Dharma has to be abandoned, not to mention the non-Dharma, has become a very famous saying and is cited in many treatises on Buddhism. Even the Dharma has to be abandoned, not to mention the non-Dharma, means that the Buddha said that the non-Dharma must be abandoned decisively, because not only does it not take us to the shore of peace and liberation, but it also makes us sink into suffering. So the wrong view, the non-Dharma that Ariṭṭha had earlier, must be abandoned decisively. This is easy to understand, right? But even the Dharma has to be abandoned. This is something we should think about together for a moment. The Dharma is the teaching of the Buddha, but we have taken refuge in the Dharma. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We honor the Buddha, we honor the Dharma of the Buddha, and we honor the Sangha. So why does it say here that even the Dharma has to be abandoned? It says that a person who has crossed to the other side of the river, to the shore, should abandon the Dharma and not hold on to it anymore. What does abandon mean? How do we abandon it? This is a place where we must be careful, because if we misunderstand it, we will do things that are harmful. We must understand the abandonment of the raft of the Dharma correctly. Now we have an easier example to see. For example, we have a bridge that crosses a river. When we have gone from this shore to the other shore, do we cut down this bridge? Why not? So that others can cross, right? That's right. It's not that when we have crossed to the other shore, we are so happy that we just stand there on the bridge and praise it, and then we don't do anything else. That is wrong. We still have to go to many places, but we must keep this bridge. There are still so many people who need to cross. Now let's go back to the raft. For example, if we have used that raft to cross, we should either find a way to return the raft to the other side so that others can use it to cross, or we should show the people on the other side how to make a raft to cross, right? We cannot cross and then smash and burn the raft so that no one else can cross. The word abandon here can easily be misunderstood by us. What does it mean? To deny. For example, we hear in the Gatha of Master Trong Chiu when he was enlightened, he said, "Destroying delusions only adds to the sickness. Rushing towards reality is also heresy." That saying is in what situation? In the situation that he has already crossed the river. He has already crossed the river, so he says that now he doesn't need to destroy delusions anymore. That saying is correct for him, but it is wrong for a person who is still practicing. For example, now, contemplating compassion is a method of practice in Buddhism. A person who has already attained enlightenment needs to contemplate compassion anymore? No. Why? Because the very nature of their mind is already great compassion. At that time, their love for sentient beings is all-encompassing, so they don't need to contemplate anymore. Contemplating anymore is redundant. But a person who has not yet attained enlightenment, it is necessary for them to contemplate the love for sentient beings every day and every hour. We cannot deny the method of practice just because we have crossed the river. We cannot cross the river and then criticize the bridge and the raft. That is ungrateful and not beneficial for the people who come after. So what does abandon mean here? It means not using anymore. No more application. Not using it anymore, because we have applied it skillfully and have achieved the goal. Not using it anymore. So we should not misunderstand that. Abandon means to criticize and deny. We also hear in a series of Mahayana sutras, there is a tendency to break the bridge. For example, the Heart Sutra. If we don't understand it skillfully, it's like burning the bridge and not letting people cross anymore. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form, no feelings, no thoughts, no formations, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharma, no I element up to no mind consciousness element. So first, the 12 links of dependent origination are denied, right? The 12 links of dependent origination are denied. Then, no suffering, no origin, no cessation, no path. What else? The 4 noble truths are also denied. So the phrase no suffering, no origin, no cessation, no path is like denying the 4 noble truths. That phrase, or no ignorance and no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death and no end of old age and death, is denying the 12 links of dependent origination. These are important teachings, but the Prajnaparamita Sutra denies them. This is very similar to crossing the river and then trampling on the bridge. We must understand this place carefully. So when someone says that, just let them say what they want. We should first understand the 12 links of dependent origination and the 4 noble truths thoroughly, because we are still on this dangerous and fearful shore, right? We are still on this dangerous and fearful shore. But a person who has crossed to the other side can talk nonsense. Let them be. And there are many Zen masters who are like that. They have crossed the river and they trample on the bridge, They burn the raft, they don't let anyone else cross. There have been many Zen masters like that in Buddhism. They see that they are pure, so whatever anyone says, they deny and reject it. That is not beneficial for the Dharma. But the Buddha, he was very careful. When he said something, he considered it. This thing is a raft, so he said it is a raft. You must practice like this, you must practice like this. But a person who has already attained enlightenment does not use it anymore. So he said that the raft of the Dharma has to be abandoned. He was very comprehensive. For a person who has not yet reached the other shore, he taught the method of practice. For a person who has already crossed the shore, he taught that even the Dharma has to be abandoned. He was very comprehensive. He had both the Theravada and Mahayana. He was very comprehensive. But the great masters of later generations, they sometimes only saw one side. Sometimes they crossed the river and wanted to show their spiritual realization, so they denied and rejected everything. To prove that they no longer needed it. They wanted to prove that they had attained enlightenment, but this is not beneficial for the people who are still practicing. We can study the scriptures, study the treatises, study the Zen masters, and in the end, we will still see that no one can surpass the Buddha. His wisdom, his compassion, his tolerance, his subtlety, no one can surpass the Buddha. The raft of the Dharma is like that. So we understand it like that. Then in the next passage, there are people who cling to the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. This sermon is full of important and big topics. We have studied the 5 aggregates, right? Have you read my book on the 5 aggregates? This is a big topic, so please try to find and read the book on the 5 aggregates. What is form? Form is what has a shape and a form, which is this body, the 4 great elements. What is feeling? Feeling is sensation. But at this place, I don't understand what the Buddha said in the past. Because when we analyze this feeling, we see 2 things. I see this point. For example, for a sensation caused by contact. When pain and joy arise, I don't know if this feeling includes this sensation. For example, when a person slaps my cheek, what is the sensation? Pain. Then a feeling of suffering usually arises. But there are people who get a slap on the cheek and it hurts, but they don't suffer. Because they have practiced. They are calm. Does that happen? So I don't know if the feeling refers to the suffering and joy after contact or to this painful sensation. Now let's reverse it. For example, someone pets my cheek. What is the sensation at that time? Happiness. Right? I didn't know about this. I just asked. Oh, so when someone pets your cheek, it's happiness. Then at that time, the feeling that arises is joy. But there are people who don't feel joy. Why? Why? Because the person who pets my cheek is sometimes a rough person, so I'm scared. I don't feel joy. If the person is pretty and charming, then petting my cheek might be joyful, but if the person's mouth is wide open and their eyes are both looking at the same place, for example, then petting my cheek is not joyful. Therefore, this sensation and this feeling are separate. I don't know which one the Buddha meant when he talked about feeling in the past. Could be both. I don't know. Now, perception. Perception in Pali is sana. Sana has several meanings. One meaning is to leave an impression. Another meaning is to perceive. In English, it's perception, because I am saying this so that later you will encounter it. Here, when Westerners read the word sana in Pali, they understand it as perception. But the Chinese patriarchs, when they read the word sana, they understood it as leaving an impression, so they translated it as perception. It means that what you see when you close your eyes, you can still imagine it. That imagination is the impression that it leaves. The Chinese patriarchs translated that as tuong, perception, which is imagination. So, here, which is more correct? Perception or imagination? Imagination is more correct, right? I also think so. When I researched the 5 aggregates, I saw that the Chinese patriarchs translated it more correctly than the Western scholars later. In the future, when you read treatises in foreign languages and you see that they translate perception as perpsin, perception, you will understand. Because the word sana has 2 or 3 meanings, and they chose one meaning that seems to be wrong. It seems to be wrong. Now, mental formations. Mental formations are sakra. I have said before that it has several meanings, right? It also means conditioned phenomena. So when we read the sermon that says all conditioned phenomena are impermanent, they translate it wrongly. It should be translated as all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. Only when it talks about human psychology should the word sakra be translated as mental formations. But if it talks about many things in the world, the word sakra should be translated as conditioned phenomena. So what are these mental formations? Mental formations are almost all the activities of the mind. The ego is hidden a lot in the mental formations. Mental formations are, for example, when we make a decision, when we create, when we take something out of memory, when we reason, when we imagine. It means that this imagination also belongs to mental formations. It also directs our hands and feet to act. It's also mental formations. Therefore, many people don't see these mental formations. We can see perception, but we can't see mental formations. When the mind has a delusion, we can see it, but we can't see how the mental formations operate. The mental formations are very deep, and when some Zen masters can enter into a state of concentration, they can see the mental formations. Then they think, "Ah, this is my wonderful self-nature. What is a Buddha?" Someone asks. They walk back and forth to show that, "Ah, a Buddha is what can control my feet to walk back and forth." That person has misunderstood. They have seen the mental formations, but they think the mental formations are the Buddha nature. Many Zen masters are like that. What is the meaning of the patriarchs coming from the West? They chop wood and carry water, thinking that the action of chopping wood and carrying water is the Buddha nature. In reality, that is an activity that is emitted by the mental formations, the decision to act. That is what the mental formations emit. And this imagination is slow, but the mental formations are very fast. For example, when we meet an old friend, we think, "Ah, brother Sun, I have to go and call him." The words that arise in our mind have a language that belongs to the thought. But as soon as our eyes meet, the mental formations have already decided to go and greet them. It's very fast. Then the thought gradually describes the intention of the mental formations with a sentence that has a language. So the sentence with a language is the thought aggregate, but a subtle and very fast intention that is emitted within, we can't see it in time. That is the mental formations. Now, consciousness is even faster. Consciousness has a lot of things. A lot. But today we can't talk about all of them. For example, the consciousness on the outside. We have 5 senses. We see things on the outside with our eyes. That's eye consciousness. We hear sounds with our ears. That's ear consciousness, right? Our tongue tastes, our skin touches. There is also a 6th one, which is consciousness of the mind. It is our mind that arises thoughts, and we know that we are thinking. That is mind consciousness. So we know the external world through the 5 senses. But we know our own mind. That is mind consciousness. Remember that. Mind consciousness. Therefore, many Western philosophers say that inside me, there are 2 people, one mind to think and one mind to know that thinking. It's as if there are 2 people. I challenge you to tell me where the ego is, between the thinking and the knowing of that thinking. Do you agree that when we think, we know that we are thinking, right? We sit in meditation all the time. Do we not know whether our mind has delusions or not? We do. So where is the ego between the thinking and the knowing of the thinking? In the unconscious mind. Someone gave that answer. In the conscious mind. So conscious mind and unconscious mind are all we have. Does anyone have another answer? That's what we usually do. Between the thinking and the knowing of the thinking, the ego is not anywhere. So where is the ego? There is no ego. Our mind is a whole block. Our mind and body are a whole block that combines together. One is in the form of matter, one is the sensation, one is the perception, one is the activity, and one is the knowing of everything. These things combine to form a person like Min-Tri, but we cannot find the true ego in it. We cannot find a central ego that is the master of these 5 aggregates. There is no such thing. There is absolutely no such thing. Do you agree? Have you realized this yet? Have you realized it yet? This is the place where, if you can understand it, you will understand Buddhism. Because the Buddha's teaching of non-self, when the Buddha said it over and over again, he was talking about this. There is absolutely no ego in each of these aggregates. There is no ego in form, no ego in feeling, no ego in perception, no ego in mental formations, and no ego in consciousness. There is no ego anywhere. That is why there is no ego. But we have the illusion that there is an ego. When all five of these things cooperate and operate, we see as if there is a central self that is different from everything, everyone, and every object on the outside. We have that illusion, but in reality, there is no master ego of these five aggregates. This is an extremely important and essential point of Buddhism. We must understand this place to understand all the Nikaya sermons from now on. When you study the Nikayas, you will encounter this issue over and over again. The Buddha mentions it again and again. There is no self in form. There is no self in feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. We must understand this place thoroughly. There was a time when the Buddha and Venerable Rahula were going on an alms round. It was a beautiful scene. Two father and son walking together on an alms round. Both of them were so beautiful, like angels. As they were walking, the Buddha was teaching the Dharma. This time, the Buddha was not sitting still in front of an audience to teach the Dharma, but he was walking and teaching in an intimate way, and Venerable Rahula was walking one step behind him to listen to him teach the Dharma. They were carrying their alms bowls. The Buddha talked about this place. The Buddha talked about form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And Venerable Rahula understood everything. The Buddha told him that there is no ego in each of these aggregates. Venerable Rahula suddenly understood. His whole body was moved. He immediately asked to go back. The Buddha asked him why he wasn't going on the alms round. He said, "World-honored one, no one can understand this and continue to go on in alms round. I must go back and meditate." He went back to the monastery and sat in meditation to contemplate this matter further. At that time, the Buddha continued to go on the alms round, and Venerable Rahula gave up his food to sit in meditation. The Buddha finished his alms round in the afternoon and came back to the monastery. He went to where Venerable Rahula was meditating. He saw that Venerable Rahula was proficient in this matter. He then taught him about the breath. After that, Venerable Rahula, after deeply understanding the non-self in these five aggregates, began to practice with his breath, and a few days later, Venerable Rahula attained arhatship. This is the important foundation. Today, no one is moved in their whole body when they hear this. When we can understand this place, we can understand all of Buddhism. There was a monk who asked the Buddha about this place. The Buddha said that when a person knows this, there is nothing that is I. Therefore, there is no worry and sorrow about things that are not real. This is because we contemplate inside our body that the five aggregates are not real. When we contemplate anything that we know or see on the outside, which are the elements, we know that all things in this world are not real. And because of that, we can escape worry and sorrow. The teaching that says all phenomena are not real was already in the Nikayas. The Mahayana later expanded on it. It's not that the Mahayana said something new. About things that are not real, there is no worry and sorrow. This thought was already said in this sermon on the simile of the snake. We must remember this. Then a monk asked the Buddha, "World-honored one, can there be something that is not real on the outside that also causes worry and sorrow?" The Buddha said, "Yes." "What is that?" "That is our possessions, our money, our land, our houses, our loved ones, etc. When we think that they are permanent, and we want to hold on to them, when we lose them, we suffer. But a person who is not attached to their external possessions, their clothes, their money, their houses, their land, and knows that they are impermanent, that person does not suffer." The Buddha said that about the things on the outside, in the time of the Buddha and the monks did not keep money. They were able to practice. Do we keep money today? Do you keep money? In my pagoda, I try not to let the community keep money. The money is given to the treasurer. No one in the community keeps any money, but they feel very secure because they know that the money is theirs. I don't keep any money either, but I only keep a little bit of money for myself to travel and do other things. All the money is kept by my disciples, but the people in the community feel secure. Even though they don't keep any money, they know that the money is theirs. When they need anything, they can use it. There are no restrictions. If they are poor together. If they are rich together. It's not that when they are sick and they ask for money, they can't have it. No, because the money is theirs. When they are sick, the money is taken out immediately, no matter how many millions it costs, it is taken out to cure them. They are poor together. And so the people in the community feel secure. They don't need to keep any money. Is this good? Is it not good? It is not good enough. Because in the pagoda, they still keep money. In the Buddha's time, from the Buddha to the Sangha, no one kept a single cent. This is very special. Why is that? Why do they not need money but they can still live a calm life? We cannot answer this question unless we have entered into a state of concentration. A person who has entered into a state of concentration from the first absorption understands this. They don't need money. It's a light feeling. They don't need it. Money is a burden, a debt, a thing to be afraid of. It's not something they like. It's disgusting. We cannot imagine it now, but one day when you can enter into a state of concentration, you will naturally not want to touch money. And if you have to touch it, it is only for others, but you yourself do not like money. You don't like money, you don't like material things, you don't like to own anything. And a person like that is a person who has escaped suffering. As for the inside, the Buddha said that a monk asked, "World-honored one, can there be something that is not real inside that also causes worry and sorrow?" The Buddha said, "Yes. That is when a person believes that this world is permanent and this self is permanent. Therefore, when they hear the Dharma, they hear the Tathagata teaching to abandon all views, attachments, fixed views, underlying tendencies, all actions, to abandon all roots of existence, to extinguish all cravings, which leads to detachment, cessation, and nirvana. They can think like this: I will definitely be annihilated. I will definitely cease to exist. I will definitely not exist. They grieve, lament, cry, beat their chest, and become unconscious. So there is something that is not real inside that also causes worry and sorrow. The ego is not real, but we think it's real and we cling to it and protect it. We cling to it and protect it and we suffer. Here, there is another problem. The word atan in Pali has two meanings. One meaning is self. One meaning is soul. This self is formless, it is the master. But this soul is what comes out when a person dies. And it has the same form as when it was alive. Those are two different meanings, but because they use the same word, Westerners and we are confused in translation. The word self is not real, that's correct. But a soul can come out when a person dies temporarily. And in the Mahayana Sutras, what is it called? Intermediate state body. A soul exists. Therefore, the Mahayana and the Theravada schools are in fierce disagreement. The Theravada school denies this atan because it is not real. So they also deny the soul. They don't believe that a dead person has a soul. This is because the Buddha denied the self, and they misunderstood that he also denied the soul. These two words are the same word in Pali. In the Mahayana, they see that a soul exists, but if they accept that a soul exists, they are afraid that the Theravada school will criticize them, so they created a new word, intermediate state body. Where consciousness is the same thing, is also a soul. Therefore, here we must understand the reason for the trouble. The disagreement is because the word atan has two meanings. One meaning is self. In English, we call it self or ego, but the word soul in English is different from self. But in Pali, it's one word, atan. So when the Theravada school denies the atan of the self, they misunderstand that they also deny the soul. That's why they say that when a person dies, no soul comes out. It's like that. This is a misunderstanding. Usually, we hear that the cause of suffering is what? Craving, right? But when we studied ethics and psychology, the cause of suffering was what? Selfishness. I asked that question. Today we study the sermon and the Buddha says that the clinging to the self is the cause of suffering. The clinging to the self is a very deep cause. You have to be a person with wisdom to understand it. At a more superficial level, for a person who studies ethics, we say that selfishness is the cause of suffering. But for a person at a very superficial level, we say that craving is the cause of suffering. It is easy to understand, because there was a time when a village chief came to the Buddha and asked, "World-honored one, please explain to me why craving is the cause of suffering?" The Buddha said, "Now, in your village, when a person dies, do you suffer?" He thought for a while and said, "Yes, world-honored one, when some people die, I suffer, but when others die, I don't." "Who dies that you suffer, and who dies that you don't suffer?" He said, "The people who are my wife, my children, my parents, my siblings. When they die, I suffer. The person who owes me money and has not paid me back, when they die, I also suffer a lot. But in the case of people who are not related to me, when they die, I don't care about it. In fact, if the person who owes me money and has not paid me back dies, I am even happy." So the Buddha said, that's why craving is the cause of suffering. The answer was very simple, right? It was a simple, specific example to answer. But to go deeper, we must say that the clinging to the self is the cause of suffering. It's not like that. The Buddha had this kind of reasoning. We hear it and it's very lovely. Monks, what do you think? Can you hold on to a possession that will exist forever? No, world-honored one. The Buddha said, "Well said, monks. I am the same. I do not see a possession that can be held on to that can exist forever." This is a very good kind of reasoning. Or he said, "Do you see a self that can be clung to that does not lead to suffering?" No, world-honored one. Well said, monks. I am the same. I do not see a self that is clung to that does not have suffering. This is a way of talking, a dialogue when teaching that is very lovely. He asks the other person to bring up their view, knowing that the other person will answer correctly according to his own thoughts. When the other person answers correctly, he says, "Well said. I am the same." It's like when I ask you, "Monks, when you study like this, do you feel tired?" "Yes, Venerable, we do." "Well said, I also see it that way. Studying is very tiring. I also want to run away." It's like that. So the clinging to the self is the cause of suffering. The Buddha said, "Well said, monks. I also do not see a self that is clung to that does not arise in worry, sorrow, suffering, and distress." Here the Buddha adds one more thing. "Monks, do you see a fixed view that is relied upon that does not lead to suffering?" No, world-honored one. Well said, monks. I am the same. I do not see a fixed view that is established that does not lead to suffering. Why means to rely on. Kien means fixed view or clinging. So the word kien, why, can be translated as clinging to a fixed view. And here the Buddha gives us one more cause of suffering, which is clinging to a fixed view. Clinging to a fixed view is also a cause of suffering. Have you heard the sermon on clinging to a fixed view yet? In the past, near the end of my lecture, I gave 2 tapes on the sermon on clinging to a fixed view. Have you heard them yet? Not yet? So the lesson on ethics and psychology is not complete because it's not 30 topics but 31 topics, and I have already lectured on clinging to a fixed view, so I just gave the tape for you to listen to. If you haven't heard it, you all must get that tape and listen to it. Besides these causes of suffering, there is one more cause, a cause that is even deeper than these. Has anyone found it? The final cause is ignorance. Ignorance is the cause of suffering. But what is ignorance? We can't give a specific definition. This belongs to the wisdom of those who have attained enlightenment. We are not going to discuss it today, but here we see this. Monks, if there is a self, is there a possession of the self? What is a possession of the self? It means things that belong to me, that are mine. Yes, world-honored one. If there is a possession of the self, is there a self? Yes. Here, the Buddha says, There are some things that are the self and the possessions of the self that cannot be permanent. The self will be permanent after death. It will be eternal, it will be immortal, it will not change. I will stay like this forever. People who cling to that until they realize the truth, they hear the truth that those things are not permanent and they suffer. This is called the fear of losing oneself. This is the quality of a person who has good karma or not in the Dharma. A person who has deep good karma in the Dharma, for example, in this life they have not yet attained concentration, they have not yet practiced much, their mind is still agitated, but in a past life they had already attained concentration. In this life, their practice has not yet returned because of some karmic cause that covers it. But when they hear that the self is not real and this world is impermanent, they immediately feel happy. They feel joyful. Then this person has good karma in the Dharma. They have practiced in a past life. But a person who has never practiced in past lives, who is arrogant and selfish, when they hear that the Dharma says the self is not real, that the body will be destroyed, and the ego or soul is not permanent and will wander, they are very sorrowful. So this is the place where we can evaluate whether a person has good karma or a high capacity in the Dharma. And if you hear this and you feel your mind is calm and peaceful, then this person has good karma. There is hope. I hope that when you hear this, you will feel joyful. It means that in a past life, you have entered into a state of concentration, so you feel happy in that state of concentration. But there are people who, when they enter into a state of concentration and there is nothing left, they are afraid. They feel, oh, so everything will be lost? But a person who dares to jump into that state of concentration sees that the place where everything is lost is the place where there is happiness. So they have already attained enlightenment in a past life. At this place, the Buddha defines one more passage. Impermanence is synonymous with suffering. Monks, what do you think? Is form permanent or impermanent? World-honored one, it is impermanent. Is that which is impermanent painful or pleasant? World-honored one, it is painful. Is that which is impermanent, painful and subject to change, fit to be regarded as this is mine, this is I, this is myself? World-honored one, no. We will hear this sentence over and over again in other Nikaya sermons. It means that what is impermanent is suffering. This is a formula. This is a formula. What is impermanent and changes and is painful, we should not say that it is I. We should not say that it is myself. The Buddha said this over and over again in the sermons. We hear it, and sometimes we are bored, but if we contemplate deeply on this meaning, we will see that the teaching is very great. Therefore, in the Nikayas we often encounter repetitions, but please don't be bored by them. You must see that this is a great teaching. It is the formula of Buddhism. Whatever is impermanent is suffering. What does not exist and we cannot hold on to forever, that is suffering. For example, this body. One day it will die, so that is suffering. Don't understand suffering as something else. Impermanence is suffering. It's the same with feeling. Suffering already makes us uncomfortable. Joy is the same. When joy passes, it also makes us suffer and regret. Just like people who live a glorious life when they are young, when they are old, they often regret that time, and that is also a kind of suffering. Or any kind of happiness, any pleasure that we find and then lose, also makes us suffer. So impermanence means suffering. It means change. And this stream of consciousness, it flows according to its own will. It goes wherever it wants, thinks whatever it wants. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. All sorts of things. The Buddha called that impermanence suffering. Since it is impermanent, which means suffering, which means change, we should never think that it is a permanent self. We should never think that it is permanent self. Is there a permanent self? We can be confused in our reasoning here. We have seen that the Buddha denied everything. There is no self because these aggregates and all external possessions are all impermanent and not stable. And we intentionally do that. Could it be that the Buddha is unintentionally encouraging us to find a permanent self? This is something we can misunderstand. It's not like that. The Buddha did not encourage us to find a permanent self, but many times later we are influenced by Hinduism, and we go to look for a true self. The concept of a true self in Zen is very close to the true self in Indian yoga. It means that we have not completely escaped the ego yet. Be careful here. In the past, we talked about the 3 levels of ego. Clinging. The first is what? Coarse ego clinging, which is clinging to this body as the self. The second is mind-made ego clinging, which is clinging to this mind as the self. The third is formless ego clinging, which is when the Indian externalists attain a state of concentration. Their mind is empty, tranquil, and clear, and they cling to that state as the self. That is still ego clinging. So this is the place where we can be misled. Although it is better than these agitations, it is a state of concentration of the mind that is empty and clear, but if we accept it as the self, we return to the view of the Indian externalists. We must overcome this as well. Even if we can enter into a state of concentration and our mind is empty and all-encompassing, we still have to reject it and continue to know that it is not yet the real thing. The concept of nirvana of the Buddhas is the place of true non-self. If we want to call it permanent or whatever, it's just a name we give to it. There are no words to describe the state of nirvana of the Buddha. We give it a name. This life is impermanent and suffering. So nirvana is permanent and happy. That's just a name. Cannot be described. It cannot be described because if we are not careful, we will mistake a state that is permanent and peaceful, a state of concentration at some level, as nirvana. If we accept that as the true self, it is a regression, not the deep essence of Buddhism. The Buddha also said the same thing about feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. They are also impermanent, which means they are suffering and they are subject to change, so it is not logical for us to say, "This is I, this is myself." Therefore, monks, any form, whether past, future or present, internal or external, coarse or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all these forms, this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. You must contemplate with wisdom. You must contemplate like this with all your wisdom. You must contemplate like this with right wisdom. Here, the Buddha goes deep into this place, but this place is so deep that the Buddha only says it in a short passage. So when we read this passage, we just skim through it and we don't understand it completely. And when we don't understand it completely, we usually have a reaction in our mind. We feel sleepy, we feel bored, and then we have a headache. This is a psychological thing. We must pay attention to this when we study the sutras and when we lecture in the future. This is that place.